Hey guys, on today's episode, we're gonna be going over the step-by-step process for cleaning and protecting this old Harley. Now, this thing's been sitting in the garage for years. It is absolutely disgusting, so we're gonna go over that today on Drive and Protect. This is a 2000 Harley Davidson Electroglide Standard that's carbureted and has over 40,000 miles. Now, this one was left in a garage for nearly a decade from what I'm being told, and it arrived at the studio on a box truck without a liftgate, so getting it off the truck was fairly interesting. So instead of getting everyone to carry it down, which would have been way too heavy, I raised the lifts up on my car lift while Steve and Laura and the truck driver helped sort of balance the bike on one side of the lift, and then we lowered the lift down. It actually worked, but it was a little bit precarious. With it sitting on the shop floor, you can really see just how dirty it became over all these years. After removing the battery and covering up the air filter, step one is pretty easy. Just power wash the bike. For this, I'm using the Ammo 630 power washer and a long wand extension with the white nozzle tip to carry the dirt and dust away gently. With most of the bike now wet, I filled the ammo aerator with frothy anti-salt just for the radio, gauges, and handlebar area to avoid over-soaking it with a power washer. Next, I used the foam gun and ammo foam inside the reservoir, which is a car and motorcycle soap. Then I simply foamed the bike. With the paint and parts now soaking, I filled the wash bucket with foam soap and the wheel bucket with Brute wheel soap, then focused on the wheels first with Plum and just let it soak for about 20 seconds before using the small wheel Woolly to get in between all the spokes, and then once I was done, I rinsed again. Next, I washed everything I can get my hands on, but in the future, I hope to have a bike lift to make my life way easier. Likewise, when you're working on motorcycles, using lots of little brushes, different sizes, different shapes, that sort of thing, they're going to be your best friends because there's so many tight spaces that need to kind of get in and agitate, and those brushes can do that. On the engine specifically and the surrounding components, I sprayed Titan 12 degreaser to help remove all the oils and grease. When I finished up, I power washed all the soap and the junk just came off onto my floor. It was very satisfying. As I normally do with cars, my last cleaning step here on the motorcycle is just to blow out all the water with compressed air and a towel. She's now dry. Time to polish and work on the chrome. To get started with polishing, I emptied out the boxes in the back. Oh, that's how. That's cool. And found goggles, a rope. I always use a rope when you're motorcycling. CD and an empty pack of cigarettes. You know, all the normal stuff that you would need to go for a motorcycle ride. So I could just remove them from the bike itself to get more access to the rear wheel. And later on, I would polish those boxes as well. Again, at this point, I really wish I had a bike lift or a way that I could convert my current car lift into a motorcycle lift. So if you have a slick idea or know of a way to convert what I currently have, please leave a comment below because that would be amazing for me in the future. Okay, now with the two rear boxes off, I had a whole lot more access to the rear tire, so I re-cleaned the entire wheel. In the future, I'll remove both boxes before I clean any motorcycles, but at this point in the episode, we couldn't get the key to work at the time. As a detailing and cleaning nerd, the differences between cleaning a bike and a car are pretty interesting. Cars just have a lot of real estate to cover, but it's relatively flat and easy. Bikes have way less real estate to cover, meaning less paint, but an obnoxious number of creases and crevices that will cause hand and finger soreness over time. So when possible, use smaller machines, use brushes, and especially compressed air to give your hands a little bit of a break. Just for the record, none of this is particularly hard to do, so if you're watching this and you want to do it to your bike, it's really not that complicated. It's just tedious and time-consuming, but it is therapeutic for the mind for sure. Okay, at this point, I spent about an hour or so removing the corrosion, at least on this side. I have the other side to do, and I wanted to talk about the three sort of generalized ways to remove corrosion from chrome pieces. The first one, of course, is mechanical. As a detailer, I'd be using, let's say, a microfiber cutting pad or a wool pad with compound and just sort of sanding it down and removing it that way. The second way is using a chemical. You're gonna use a low pH, like an acid, put it on here, and you're gonna see it sort of dissolve away. The downside to that, of course, is if you hit areas that don't like acid, you're gonna ruin them in the process. So keep that in mind, especially when you rinse it down. A lot of that water is gonna carry the acid around. So that sometimes gets a little tricky. Now, the third way that I'm using right now is steel wool. Kevin calls it, I think I get this right, the squeegee slicer. What that means is 4/0 steel wool is basically just thousands of little blades in here that are sort of cutting away at the oxidation or the corrosion. What I'm doing is a little bit of a in-between. I'm using the wheel cleaner, which is a lower pH, meaning it's not as strong as like hydrofluoric acid or some crazy strong acid that will really do a great job but damage it. It's what we use on our wheels back there, and I'm combining the two of them, and that seems to be working really well. After an hour or so of chrome rejuvenation, I also wanted to bring some life back to the primary cover right here. Now, this is very evident and I think people can see it, so I really wanted to make this thing pop. So I repeated the process using steel wool, and it looked better for sure, but it did seem that option one, the one we discussed earlier, meaning using abrasives, would work better in this case. So I wet sanded the area, and when I did it, look at the pad after just a few strokes. Clearly, you can see it turned black or a dark color. This is actual metal residue embedding itself into the pad. Now, if you look at the metal itself, meaning the primary cover, it looks 1,000 times better. So it was working well. I repeated the same process on the rest of the exposed engine components on both this side and the other side to clean up the corrosion and sort of just bring back a bit of life to this forgotten bike. Next, I removed the 3000 grit marks with a microfiber cutting pad and compound on a 3-inch air-powered DA polisher. Once again, the pad turned black just like they did earlier on the sanding discs. After the microfiber pad was done, I then switched to a yellow foam pad and my new metal polish I've been playing with for quite some time, and the difference was huge. For the tighter areas, I used a 1-inch pad to clean up the top of the cylinders. Now, my goal was just to sort of give the engine some life and kind of return it back to what I think it may have looked like 10 years ago. After playing with all the metal, then we focused on the paint. And when it comes to black paint, it's pretty much business as usual. I used a 6-inch polisher here, and I certainly use a 6-inch whenever I can because it holds more residue than smaller sizes, which can be super helpful on heavily faded paint like this one here. To do this, I'm using a wool pad and polish, then a foam pad and polish. Again, adjust the size according to the area you're working, but my point is just try to stay in the largest diameter that can safely fit on the paint you're correcting. The difference on the nose when I was done was huge, so I was on the right track and I just needed to do that process on the rest of the bike. With about a half a day of compounding and polishing every little piece under my belt, I took a break to clean up the one leather piece on the bike, which was the seat. Once everything was cleaned, I restored the parched leather with Ammo Mousse conditioner and UV protectant, then wiped it dry to avoid any slickness in the future, and the before and after was incredible. Lastly, I polished what I could on the air filter for some extra pop before protecting the paint with Reflex Pro coating. After applying it, you wait for it to rainbow like you see here. It can be anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds, and then buff it off. It will take a few hours to fully cure, so avoid water if possible, but as it does harden, the depth and shine will get deeper and more vibrant. After coating all the paint, I then protected all the exposed metal, meaning the chrome, the aluminum, exhaust pipe, wheels, bars, storage racks, light housing, and so on with Gillette Pro wheel coating. The wheel coating is much stronger but less flexible than the paint coating, meaning Reflex Pro. With everything now clean and coated, I reinstalled the seat and she was looking way better, but I did want to get some background info from my buddy Al, who happens to own the massive Harley dealership in Danbury, Connecticut, right down the road from me. I love learning more about the history of each car, but in this case, obviously a bike, and where it sits among the various models that Harley has built over the years.
Hey Larry, how you doing? Electroglide. So it's part of the touring line that Harley made, model year 2000, but it generally came without a radio. This one's had a radio upgrade added to it. Instead of having a big tour pack for extra luggage capacity for long haul over the road trips.
Like another one of these things here?
Yeah, we call it a tour pack. Yeah. Never came with a tour pack. And what Harley did to try to get this bike a little more affordably into the hands of the consumer is kind of, how can I say it, a little Model T-like. You can have it in most any color you want as long as it's black.
Yeah.
And we didn't have the more expensive chrome and black wrinkle engine. Harley gave you a silver and polished aluminum engine, a little lower finish, but still look good. 45-degree V-twin. This is a way for someone on a budget to get into a Harley touring bike. And this is a motorcycle with once fresh set of tires and get it running. Somebody can hop on this and they can, ride anywhere they want. They could take it from the East Coast here in Connecticut, ride straight to California if they want. It should get them there reliably. Needs a little maintenance, needs a little TLC, but it's a great way, again, to get into a touring Harley on a budget.
It's awesome. I appreciate you coming in. This is super cool.
My pleasure.
Thanks. With all that info, all that was left was to get Steve from across the street to help this baby turn over. And for the record, we checked the oil and the carburetor and the plugs and so on before we gave her a quick crank.
You're going to have to hit the button.
Where is that?
The one that says start. They dumbed it down for you.
Thank you. Tell me when.
Start.
Again?
Go ahead. Hit it.
Mission accomplished. She's alive!
Fire.
Woo!
Potato, potato.
As Al mentioned, this clearly needs tires and a tune-up and some basic love, but I do think she'll be back on the highway very soon.